Welcome back to the Countdown to Bond 25. I'm Andrew Fantasia. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't be afraid to hit that like button and give some love to that subscribe button as well, because remember, everything we're doing today, we do for Queen and Country. Let's get started. Today's movie is the 1969 quote-unquote black sheep of the James Bond series, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of a disclaimer here. I'm not going to spoil the ending of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, even though this movie is over 50 years old. I just can't bring myself to spoil this if you have not seen it yet, because the ending of this film is a whopper. It's a big one. And I want to preface today's episode by letting all of you guys know, for the record, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of my favorite James Bond movies ever. It's like in my top 4. If you've seen it, you know exactly why. If you haven't seen it, you're in for a treat. Please go watch it. Alright, summing up the plot for this movie is going to be a bit complicated, but I'll do the best I can. Blofeld is back, the leader of Spectre is back, and he has a new plan. He has set up a facility in the Swiss Alps under the guise of being an allergy research clinic. However, what this place actually is doing is he is using it to turn his patients into unwitting assassins under his command via hypnosis. James Bond has spent the last several years since the events of You Only Live Twice trying to figure out where Blofeld escaped to. Now that he's found him and he's unearthed Blofeld's new plan, he has to get himself in this clinic somehow and destroy it from the inside out. On top of that, there's the head of an Italian crime cartel named Draco, and James keeps having several coincidental run-ins with Draco's daughter, Teresa. Well, Teresa takes a liking to James, but she keeps running away every time James gets close. So Draco calls up James and says, listen, my daughter is a wonderful girl, but she's very, very sad. She's basically going through depression, and it would mean the world to me and to her if you would marry her. And James is like, what? No, I don't get married. That's not what I do. I'm James Bond. And Draco's like, I'll give you £1 million. And James is like, excuse me? And so while having to contend with the Blofeld situation, James also is contending with Teresa and Draco and that whole thing. And yes, the two stories do cross paths eventually. In terms of songs, they took a different approach here as well. They didn't get a famous pop singer to come on and do a song called On Her Majesty's Secret Service because, frankly, there are some titles that just don't translate well to song lyrics, and this is one of them. However, we do get a new theme from John Barry, who composes the original James Bond theme that everybody knows. You know, bum 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 bum. John Barry did that. He does a new theme specifically for this movie, just called the On Her Majesty's Secret Service theme. And guys, this theme is so friggin' good. It is somehow more synonymous with James Bond than the actual James Bond theme. Even though it's actually slower and quieter, using an intriguing blend of the typical orchestral instruments and some heavy synthesizers thrown in there for good measure, all of a sudden you have something that sounds both classical and modern. It's a really interesting theme, and it's fitting because we are leaving the 60s, heading into the 70s, so it's like the worlds of old Bond and new Bond are meeting at this point. This is like the crossroads of music. Even though a pop star does not sing the title song, there are 2 songs written specifically for this movie sung by professional singers. They just take place within the story itself. First, there is the love theme for Bond and Teresa. Because yes, Bond and Teresa do have a lot of romantic moments in this film. They have a love theme called All the Time in the World, sung by none other than Satchmo himself, Louis Armstrong. It's very surreal watching a James Bond movie, seeing him walk through a garden hand in hand with a girl and hearing Louis Armstrong just belting out lyrics like, we have all the time in the world. You're never going to get another Bond experience like this, I'll tell you that right now. Then there's another song that's played only in the background during a few village scenes. The song is called Do You Know How Christmas Trees Are Grown, and it's sung by a Danish singer named Nina. Now this is so fascinating to me because you only ever hear the song in the background. The lyrics are not great. It plays during some heavy action scenes when you're not paying attention to the music. It's a very kid-friendly song. I mean, it's called Do You Know How Christmas Trees Are Grown. It sounds like it's a song from some old school old kids' Christmas TV special that was just covered in a layer of cheese. But for some reason, it was written only for On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's so weird. It's just this mysterious little background ditty that you hear just a couple little times, and that's it. You don't even hear the full song from start to finish. It's just such an oddity. Again, this is doing stuff no other James Bond film does. Of course, there are many firsts in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. The first and foremost first is the fact that we have our first new actor stepping into the role of James Bond. Welcome to the stage, please, Mr. George Lazenby, the Australian model and sometime actor, was cast in the role just for his swagger and confidence when he walked into the audition room. Lazenby is not the strongest actor of the series. Remember, I said he started off as a model, but you gotta admit, he has the James Bond look. Everything from the hair, to the voice, to the way he carries himself, he really does embody this character of James Bond. Ian Fleming drew a sort of caricature of what he would imagine James Bond looked like while he was writing the books. While you could say it does look a lot like every actor who has stepped into the role, I really think Lazenby in this movie fills the silhouette of this caricature the best. Unfortunately, the fame that this movie got him got Lazenby invited to all kinds of parties and soirees, and at these parties and soirees, he fell in with a crowd of people who would eventually become hippies. This was 1969 after all. So he kind of fell in with the hippie crowd, and all he wanted to do was grow his hair long and grow a beard. He just became obsessed with that mentality for a bit, which was cool, but it wasn't James Bond. So when they asked him to come back for a second one, and he was like, well, yeah, sure, but I gotta keep my beard. They were like, no beard, this is James Bond. And they decided to move on with someone else. So yes, he is the only actor so far who has played James Bond in a motion picture just one time. However, for the first, and I'm pretty sure last time, we get to see a movie where James Bond wears a kilt. Yeah, it's funny. We just spent 5 movies with a Scottish Bond, and now that we have an Australian Bond, they decide to throw him in a kilt. And in case you're wondering, yes, George Lazenby can pull off a kilt. And this is the first time we get to see M's private residence. Yeah, M doesn't live in his office, kids. He has a house just like everybody else. And since M's career was being part of the British Navy, his house has a name that is based off a nautical term. His house is called Quarterdeck. Personally, I'm obsessed with the idea of houses having names. We're going to see that again later on in the series with Skyfall, the house where James Bond grew up. I want my house to have a name. That's all I want in the world. I just want a nice house where I live for the rest of my days that has a name. Can't we all just have that? In terms of gadgets, this is a very gadget-light movie. This is more about James Bond just getting by on his wits and wits alone. He does have an Aston Martin, though this is an Aston Martin DBS, not the DB5. Personally, I think the look is almost identical, but I do prefer the look of the DB5 just because it's more retro, and retro cars are cool. We also see Q showing off radioactive lint. It never gets used, he just shows it off. So this is a gadget Q is working on. Thankfully, we never have to see radioactive lint put to use because frankly, that does not sound like an interesting mission to me. Here, James, use this lint. Finally, a very cumbersome gadget is a safe-cracking photostat machine. James Bond uses this to break into a lawyer's safe, and conveniently, since Q seems to know that safes tend to contain important documents, it also comes with a photostat accessory, so James can take a photocopy of any sensitive documents he finds within said safe. It's a bit slow though. James has to sit back and crack open a Playboy while he waits for this thing to work its magic. Now, one could argue that the Bond lady to end all Bond ladies is present here. You could also make the same argument later on in the series once we get to Daniel Craig, but let's not jump too far ahead. Okay, first and foremost, Blofeld's clinic is full of nothing but young, attractive female patients. We don't get to know too many of them with the exception of this girl, Ruby, so you could say she counts as a Bond lady in this film, but for me, and I'm sure for many other fans of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the true lady, the true star of the show here is Teresa Di Vincenzo. Teresa is played by Diana Rigg. You might know her as Emma Peel from The Avengers, or if you were born in this millennium, you might know her as Lady Olenna Tyrell from Game of Thrones. Diana Rigg is one of the best actresses to ever step into the role of a Bond lady. This woman is fantastic. She's so talented. She brings so much to this character, and rightfully so, because Teresa Di Vincenzo is nothing to sneeze at. This is a very special type of Bond lady. Again, I'm not going to spoil the way this movie ends, but I did mention Teresa's father wants James to marry her, because Teresa is clinically depressed. She's very alone, she's very isolated, she has grown up living amongst criminals, and it's been too much for her. She's on the verge of doing something rash, and her father wants to nip that in the bud. Now, at first, Teresa sees Bond the way Bond sees most women, as just an attractive person she can have a one-night stand with. Then as time goes on and we get nice little montages where Louis Armstrong is singing love songs, Teresa starts to get feelings for James Bond, and it's mutual. Yeah, folks, James Bond falls in love in this movie. Yes, he is still a womanizer, and yes, he still has his way with as many of Blofeld's sexy, unwitting assassins as he can, but Bond genuinely does fall in love. It's a great turning point for the character, and we have Diana Riggs Tracy to thank for that. Sorry for the ambient noise, by the way. It just sounds like the people upstairs have left their faucet on for the past half hour. I'm not joking. Who are the villains of On Her Majesty's Secret Service? Well, I've already mentioned Ernst Stavro Blofeld, but we also get a new henchwoman, Irma Bunt. She has some characteristics that are very reminiscent of Rosa Klebb from Russia with Love, but Irma Bunt seems like a warmer, actually kind of kinder woman than Rosa Klebb. Irma Bunt kind of runs things at the clinic. She's Blofeld's second in command. She's the one who takes care of these girls, makes sure that they're all behaving themselves, gets them from point A to point B, organizes their activities. Then there's Blofeld himself. This time around, he is played by Telly Savalas. Now, this is really interesting for a couple reasons. Number one, Telly Savalas is not putting on a foreign accent. Every time we have heard Blofeld speak, it has been with some variation of a hard-to-place European accent, because he is apparently, the character is supposed to be Belgian, but he has different cadences depending on who's playing him. It's always just sounded vaguely, ominously foreign, because that's unfortunately what Ian Fleming thought made a scary villain, was foreignness. Telly Savalas does not attempt any kind of accent. He is speaking in his regular American accent. It is a very formal, erudite American accent. He's got a whole Sideshow Bob thing going there, but he is American at the end of the day. So yes, we can add this to our list of firsts. This is the first time our main villain in a Bond movie does not speak with a foreign accent. I really dig Telly Savalas' portrayal of Blofeld. I think he does a good job with it, and he brings this sort of hospitable charm to the character. He's still evil to the core, but he might be the friendliest Blofeld we've ever had. One thing that I remember noticing the first time I watched this was taking into account the fact that Blofeld is bald, and then adding in the fact that Telly Savalas has a very deep, commanding American accent. His character in this reminded me a lot of Lex Luthor, the Superman villain. Well, it turns out that when they were making their animated series for Superman in the 90s, Bruce Timm and Paul Dini and all those folks there used Telly Savalas' Blofeld as inspiration for the way they tackled Lex Luthor in that cartoon. Clancy Brown does the voice of Luthor in this show, and you'll notice if you listen to it, Clancy Brown is pretty much doing a bang-on impression of Telly Savalas as Blofeld from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's all connected, man. I just really wish Savalas had played Lex Luthor instead of Gene Hackman. I'm sorry, I think those movies are great, but Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor did nothing for me. There are virtually no death traps in this movie unless you include a certain point where James Bond's cover is blown. He has been hiding out undercover in this clinic, and when they discover him, Blofeld and his goons throw him into this little room that is used as the gear room for all the cable cars that go up and down this mountain. There's a lot of gears that he could hurt himself on, but other than that, it's kind of easy for James Bond to get out of this room. For the best quote of the film, I'm going to have to give that award to my homegirl, Miss Moneypenny. She does a very kind thing for James Bond. She basically saves his career at a certain point. James Bond looks at her and smiles and says, "Moneypenny, what would I do without you?" And Moneypenny says, "My problem is that you never do anything with me." You gotta love this lady. And Lois Maxwell is a fellow Canadian, so that automatically makes her cool. Canadians are automatically cool. Trust me. Just because it's 1969 and there's freedom and hippies and groovy and love and all that jazz, there is still plenty of racism and sexism to be had in this James Bond film. So what was the crown jewel of Discomfort? Well, it came close. Initially, I thought it was the scene where James Bond meets up with Draco, and Draco basically tries to sell his daughter in marriage to James Bond. The fact that these two men, one of them pretty much a complete stranger to her, are trying to negotiate her future is bad enough. But then Draco starts throwing in money, and he even says this line, "What she needs is a man to dominate her." No, that's not what she needs. That's not what anybody needs. But that's not the most offensive thing this movie does. The most offensive thing that it does almost makes me uncomfortable to say out loud. It involves all of the women at Blofeld's clinic. See, they are there to supposedly cure their allergies. Now, the particular allergies that all of these women have center around food. Ruby, for example, the one we get to know the most, is allergic to chicken. Okay, fine. Innocent enough, I guess. But here's the thing. These girls are all very, very multicultural. They come from all corners of the globe. You got Asian women, South Asian women, Middle Eastern women, white women, black women, green women. Yeah, one of them's a Martian. Okay, I might have made that part up, but still, every single demographic is represented in this group of young ladies. So during a particular scene, we see them all sit down to dinner, and they are all eating the things that they were once allergic to, and Blofeld has apparently cured them of those allergies. However, everything they eat is stereotypically tied in to their race. The white girls are eating food that is more or less par for the course. Then they start showing what the foreign girls are eating. The Asian girl is eating just a bowl of rice. The Indian girl is eating a plate with nothing but naan bread. And finally, I can't believe I'm actually saying this out loud, the black girl has nothing on her plate except a single banana. Jesus Christ, 1969. But horrendous racial stereotypes aside, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is absolutely wonderful. It's so full of James Bond goodness, it'll make your head spin. If you're a fan of James Bond lore, of the character's lore itself, you'll learn something really interesting about James Bond. You see the coat of arms of his family as well as his family motto, Orbis non sufficit. That's Latin for the world is not enough. And hey, guess what? That's the name of the 19th James Bond movie. It's like poetry. They rhyme. James partakes in his typical medium dry vodka martini in this film, but when he's undercover at the clinic posing as a historian named Hilary Bray, he makes a bizarre drink order. He orders, quote, whiskey and branch water. I don't know what the hell that is, and I don't want to know. Now, there is a fair bit of globe hopping at the beginning of the film, but for the most part, I would say 90% of On Her Majesty's Secret Service takes place in Switzerland, and you get the whole shebang. You get urban Switzerland in the city, you get rural villages, and you get the desolate Swiss Alps, and they are all beautiful. It looks so cool. At this point, this is the best looking James Bond movie they have made so far. I mean, look at the wallpaper in this casino. Oh my god, who do I have to sleep with to get to stay in that casino? Like, I just want to be there. I want to take a picture with that wall. Oh, and here's a fun little Easter egg. When James is taken to meet Draco for the first time, we see a janitor sweeping the floor. That janitor is whistling a tune. Go back and find out what tune he's whistling. That's a fun little thing they threw in. Now, I promised I wasn't going to give away the ending, and I stand by that promise. But to those of you watching this who do know how the movie ends, I'm just going to give my thoughts on this. It is a crime that we never really got to see the resolution of this cliffhanger. Yes, they snuck in some weird little bits of filmmaking later on in the series to make it seem as if the next movie does pick up where this left off, but let's be real, it's not the same. This is a much more grounded and gritty James Bond film, and to go from this to Diamonds Are Forever, which is next, and try to make us believe that they are telling the same story, no, they're not. Trust me, they're not. Nothing against Diamonds Are Forever. I think it's very fun in its own right, but no, sir, that has nothing to do with that. That doesn't even take place in the same universe as this. And given the fact that Diamonds Are Forever has a different actor playing Bond and a different actor playing Blofeld, no, forget about it. But that is On Her Majesty's Secret Service, one of, in my opinion, the best Bond movies ever made. It's a big one. It's an epic film. This is a 2-hour and 23-minute movie, I think. So park yourself in for a nice long haul, but it is well worth the effort. If watching long movies is an effort, which I don't think it should be. You're literally just sitting on your ass. This movie makes me want to see Christopher Nolan do a Bond film. In fact, the storming the snow fortress scene that takes place in Inception, that was an homage to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, because this happens to be Christopher Nolan's favorite Bond film, and it shows. It looks as if his fingerprints are all over it, even though he wasn't making film back in 1969. I know it's considered the black sheep. It has a much more serious story. It has a Bond who only showed up for one film, so people tend to overlook it. I didn't get to see this until I was well into my 20s, but I'm so glad I finally got to experience it, and I really want other Bond fans to do the same, because this is something special. Tomorrow, call up Marilyn Monroe and invite her over, because we are going to be talking all about diamonds. And from what I hear, they tend to be forever. The countdown to Bond 25 continues. I'll see you then.